This is BBC One Northern Ireland's now Clive, Myrie and Joe Scott with the BBC News at 10 o'clock.
Tonight at 10, twin bomb attacks at Kabul airport leave at least 60 dead, including a dozen US troops. A suicide bomber detonated explosives in the middle of a crowd of thousands, desperate to flee the country.
The explosion was really powerful. Half were hurled into the water, others on the ground outside. We carry the wounded here on stretchers, and here, my clothes are completely bloodied.
The second blast was at a hotel next to the airport. America says it will hunt down those responsible.
We are working very hard right now to determine attribution, to determine who is associated with this cowardly attack, and we're prepared to take action against them.
The Ministry of Defence says there were no British casualties. The Islamic State group has claimed it carried out the attacks. Also tonight, Northern Ireland's Health Minister apologises for the worst NHS waiting lists anywhere in the UK. Changes to COVID travel restrictions put Canada and Denmark on the green list, but Thailand and Montenegro go red. And gold in the pool for Great Britain on another day of success at the Paralympics in Tokyo.
And the news in Northern Ireland, an apology from the Health Minister as more people than ever spend longer on waiting lists, and a report on the impact the pandemic and restrictions have had on children.
Good evening. It was a scene of carnage in Afghanistan after twin explosions near Kabul airport killed at least 60 people, according to a health official, and injured dozens more. The first blast is thought to have been the work of a suicide bomber, passing among the crowds gathered for more than a week at one of the airport's main gates to try to get flights out of the country. The second was at a nearby hotel. Along with Afghan civilians, 12 US military personnel have died. The Ministry of Defence says there were no British casualties. The initial explosion took place just before dusk outside the Abbey Gate, leaving bodies strewn all over a sewage ditch. It's unclear how many were injured in the next blast at the Baron Hotel, further along the airport perimeter. There had been warnings in recent days that an offshoot of the Islamic State group in the region was planning an attack, and tonight IS has claimed it was behind the bombings. The Pentagon says evacuation flights will continue despite the threat of more attacks. With the very latest from Kabul, here's our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, and a warning her report contains some distressing images from the very beginning.
The feared attack, a bombing forewarned. Casualties rushed yet again into Kabul's emergency hospital after twin bombings close to Kabul airport. This man was there.
Saw at least 400 or 500 people there. The explosion was really powerful. Half were hurled into the water, others on the ground outside. We carry the wounded here on stretchers, and here, my clothes are completely bloody.
So many wounded, some shoved into wheelbarrows. Afghans who'd hoped to be on an airplane tonight, flying to a safer place. This attack claimed by the Islamic State group shattered that hope and struck one of the deadliest blows against US troops in the past 20 years.
Let me just come back one moment.
The Pentagon put on a brave face.
I'd like to offer my profound condolences to the families of our servicemen and women and Afghan civilians who lost their lives today. We have put more than 5,000 US service members at risk to save as many civilians as we can. It's a noble mission, and today we have seen firsthand how dangerous that mission is. ISIS will not deter us from accomplishing the mission. I can assure you of that.
Hours earlier, in the center of Kabul, an ever-growing clamor. People desperate to find ways to get to that airport.
I was security guard with the British people, yes.
How many years?
Maybe 1 year I was, 12 years ago.
But now the British are saying it's too dangerous to go to the airport.
Dangerous, yes. I cannot go in airport. I cannot go.
Even 3-year-old Salim is worried, just listening to his mother. Asma tells us they got to the airport and were sent from gate to gate. She says the Taliban asked, "Why do you want to leave?" and threatened to shoot her. Now it's been 2 days on this street for her exhausted children. The Taliban are now stopping Afghans from even traveling to the airport, but still they try.
They're bringing certificates, they're bringing flight details, they're bringing whatever letter they've ever had from any government anywhere in the world. Whatever the risks there are in going to the airport, whatever the risks there are at the airport today, for all of them, just look at this. For them, the greatest danger is staying here in Afghanistan.
And tonight, that danger all too clear. There'd been warnings for a week of an attack like this. A last strike against Western troops set to leave within days. Another blow to many Afghans' last hope of leaving this chaos behind. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Kabul.
Well, our correspondent Secunda Kamani is in Kabul and our North America correspondent Ali Maqbool is in Washington. To you first, Secunda. There are reports tonight of more explosions in Kabul. What more do you know?
Yeah, that's right, Clive. We've heard a number of further explosions throughout the evening. The last one quite powerful, rattling our windows here. It's not entirely clear what they were. Some suggestion that they were controlled explosions carried out by American forces, destroying equipment as they prepare to leave. But either way, they're adding to a sense of anxiety after this awful attack. Amidst all the uncertainty about the prospect of life under the Taliban and what exactly that will look like, some Afghans have been clinging to the hope that at least things would be more peaceful. There wouldn't be more suicide bombings. There'd be no more rocket attacks. These blasts, though, really, I think, raising concerns that even if the Taliban's war with the Afghan government has come to an end, with groups like IS still operating, this country could see more bloodshed in the future. Meanwhile, evacuation flights are still continuing, but the efforts here are in their final stages, with a number of European countries announcing that they've already completed all the flights they were due to carry out. We expect the American forces to really pivot from evacuating American citizens and those vulnerable Afghans they're relocating to evacuating the thousands of American troops that
raising money for the
to oversee this relocation process.
OK, Secunda, thank you for that. Live in Kabul. Let's go to Washington. Ali Maqbool is there. Aleem, this is the worst single loss of life for the US military in several years in Afghanistan. What's been the reaction in America?
Yeah, it's been a grim, sombre day here. The president has cleared his schedule today, had lots of emergency meetings. We're expecting, in fact, to hear from President Biden very shortly. As you say, certainly the greatest loss of US life for many years, the first loss of US military personnel lost in 18 months. And we've been hearing from a senior general about the circumstances of those deaths. He said it was simply unavoidable to have young US troops, men and women, based around the perimeter of this airfield to carry out physical checks on all of those who came onto the airfield. He described how in doing those checks, they wouldn't only touch the clothes of those they were checking, they would feel the breath on their faces as well. And of course, they've done that successfully for more than 104,000 people over the last week. But it is those who are carrying out those checks who have been killed. The question about whether evacuations continue, the Pentagon says they will continue, if anything, to honor the lives of those who lost their lives in the name of that mission earlier today.
OK, Aleem, thank you. Aleem Maqbool there, live in Washington. Well, our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, is here. What is this offshoot of the Islamic State group, Frank, that's now claiming it's carried out these attacks?
Well, ISIS-K stands for Islamic State in Khorasan province. That's the name they've given to themselves. Their base, as you can see, they're right in the east of the country in Nangarhar province, close to the Pakistani border. And what are they? They are a militant group of fanatical jihadists. You can see them there. They are the Afghan branch of ISIS, Islamic State, the group that terrorized Iraq and Syria and for 5 years had its self-declared caliphate. How many are there? Well, they're thought to number about 2,000 altogether. They are extremist enemies of the Taliban, and that's going to sound strange. They're not on the same page. They've actually fought the Taliban in a number of clashes. As I say, there's about 2,000 of them. They have carried out some of the most barbaric attacks in Afghanistan over the last 6.5 years. They've targeted girls' schools, maternity wards, killing nurses, babies, and attacking wedding halls. So, ironically, now that the Taliban have taken over and are no longer an insurgency themselves, they are now facing an insurgency from ISIS, from this group, ISIS-K, and they may well actually have to call for American help to deal with them.
OK. Frank, thank you. Frank Gardner, our security correspondent. Well, it's not just Kabul airport, where thousands have been gathering to try to leave Afghanistan since the Taliban took over the country. Thousands have also travelled to the border with Pakistan in the hope of getting out, but many are not being allowed through. Our correspondent Shumaila Jaffrey reports now from the border.
This is the Spin Boldak border point. Thousands of desperate families trying to escape into Pakistan. These are people who knew they had no chance at Kabul airport. They are desperate to reach safety. But there is chaos here too. Just a few are being let across. These families left almost everything behind. With small children in tow, exhausted from walking in the baking heat. The elderly and sick pushed on wheelbarrows. As the Taliban flag flutters at the border, people tell us they don't trust their country's new rulers and see no future in Afghanistan anymore.
Nothing clear, no one can trust Taliban because we have some experience 20 years ago. Right now we just want to come to a safe area.
The people here have come from across Afghanistan.
Since the Taliban have captured Kabul, thousands of ordinary Afghans are crossing through the Chaman-Spin Boldak border every day.
This woman is from the minority Hazara community persecuted by the Taliban. She has made the dangerous trip from Kabul with her daughters. She tells me that her daughter-in-law was killed in a Taliban bombing some years ago.
They are terrible people. I am scared of them. They have martyred my daughter-in-law. They don't have any sympathy. They are heartless.
The people here are scared for their safety. There are many reasons for Afghans to fear the Taliban. They are walking into unknown futures. Still, they don't want to stay behind. Shumaila Jaffrey, BBC News, Chaman, Pakistan.
Boris Johnson says UK evacuation flights will go on, and as Afghan refugees continue to arrive in Britain, one interpreter who worked with UK forces has been speaking to our special correspondent Lucy Manning. He's currently in quarantine with his family.
A new life inside UK.
This is what freedom looks like. When you leave your homeland and have to build a home again. This is refuge.
How are you and all the family doing?
Everyone is okay, and now we are in safety and we are very thankful.
We spoke to Burhan, a former interpreter, and his family last week, hiding in Kabul. UK, please do not leave us, they pleaded. This country didn't leave them. Today they're in quarantine in a hotel in England.
How is your son coping with all the big changes?
He just watching the window and telling me, when quarantine finished, I will walk this street, I will walk to see that car. Happiness is in his face.
It was a hellish journey. Burhan filmed part of it. The crush outside the airport, close to today's explosion.
It was dangerous for me, and everyone was worried about this situation.
Finally, their last steps on Afghan soil, their first towards a new future.
So how was the feeling when you made it onto that RAF plane?
It was the happiest moment of my life I've ever faced.
They've left the Taliban behind, but also family and friends and other interpreters who almost certainly now can't escape.
What's your message to this government about your colleagues who still can't get out?
I demand from them, kindly demand from them to do their best to evacuate those who are left behind in Kabul, because they serve British Army and they are in danger.
At Heathrow today, hundreds more of the fortunate, girls who would have had a little future under the Taliban, who can say what the children will make of this time.
Our people in Afghanistan come here, and now we and my family safe here. Thank you a lot in UK.
Burhan's son, Sef Beher, has his pencils and cars. His wife, Narcis, is a doctor. Burhan has this promise.
I will serve this country.
You will serve this country?
I'm very thankful from everyone, the kind people here.
This country has opened its doors, but the time it took means others who served Britain won't be helped. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Northern Ireland's health minister has apologised to patients after new figures show almost a quarter of the population are waiting either for a medical procedure or a first appointment with a hospital consultant. More than half of those have been on the waiting list for at least a year. Our health editor Hugh Pym has more from Belfast.
Eileen has been waiting more than 4 years to see a consultant. Her GP thought her symptoms, including fatigue and problems with balance, could suggest multiple sclerosis. She says it's a struggle to enjoy time with her family.
I just sometimes feel I'm a number and not a person, and it's just horrible. Even earlier on, I bent down to lift up my wee granddaughter, and I could just feel, I felt that everything drain. I felt my mobility going. I don't know what to do anymore.
Eileen has now launched legal action against the health authorities in Northern Ireland. The Department of Health says it can't comment on court proceedings. Una, who has rheumatoid arthritis, hasn't waited quite as long, but it's still been 18 months, with an operation on her wrist postponed. Now she fears there could be serious long-term consequences.
I am very conscious of the damage that has been done to my wrist already, and the longer I wait, the more damage that's been done, and I'm too young to lose the power of my wrist.
Nearly 500,000 people in Northern Ireland are now waiting to see a consultant or start hospital treatment. Some who can afford it are turning to the private sector.
What we have now is a two-tier system. Those who can pay will pay, and those who cannot afford to pay will languish in pain on waiting lists, largely abandoned by the system.
Northern Ireland's waiting list problems go back well before COVID. Over a decade or so, reform plans were drawn up, but then not activated. And there was a sense that political leadership was lacking, with the suspension at one stage of the Northern Ireland Assembly. There are moves to get more patients through day procedure centres, and ministers have drawn up a 5-year funding plan.
I believe in the National Health Service, free at point of use, free at point of delivery. That's what I think we should get back to, and I think that's what we can get back to here.
What do you say to some patients who've been waiting years for treatment? What reassurance can you give them?
Well, look, first of all, I apologise to them. I apologise to them on behalf of our health service, because it's not where we want them to be.
Rising waiting lists have created a difficult challenge for all the UK's administrations, but it's a daunting one here, with the public craving a solution. Hugh Pym, BBC News, Belfast.
The government's latest coronavirus figures show there were 38,281 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 34,072 new cases per day in the last week. The most recent figures show there were 6,906 people in hospital with the virus as of yesterday. 140 deaths were recorded in the past 24 hours, with an average of 110 a day in the past week. On vaccinations, more than 88% of adults in the UK have now had their first jab, and more than 77% have had 2. The government has announced changes to COVID travel restrictions for a number of countries. From Monday, Canada, Denmark and Finland are among those moving to the green list, but Thailand and Montenegro moved to the red list. Travel bosses say continuing uncertainty over the rules is causing difficulties for the industry. Here's our transport correspondent, Caroline Davies.
The small routines of going on holiday. The number of people travelling abroad has picked up this month, but it's still far behind pre-pandemic levels. And the industry says only a change of the way travel works will make a difference.
What I'd love to see is the requirement for tests on vaccinated passengers, see that lifted. That would stimulate a huge amount of recovery.
The changes come in across the UK from 4 a.m. on Monday. The Portuguese Azores, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Liechtenstein, Lithuania and Switzerland will go green. Montenegro and Thailand will go red. Nothing has moved to amber. There will be relief that many major holiday destinations are still amber, but there are concerns that the summer has already set the industry off on a difficult track. The travel industry relies on the money made in busy summers to keep it going throughout the rest of the year. The fact that this summer has so far not lived up to expectations means that there are questions about what happens next. The industry still has thousands of staff on furlough, which stops at the end of September. There are fears jobs could be lost.
You'll see a loss of skills from the industry. So when the industry does want to recover and take off, it won't be able to do it in the same way. So if Britain really does want to be a global economy, we've got to try and protect the infrastructure of that global economy.
This was Ruth's first uniform when she became cabin crew in 1999. Today, she walks a different aisle. She chose to leave the industry this year.
It was very difficult, a real difficult decision. I mean, flying is in my blood and it always will be in my blood, but I've made that decision now.
The government are due to look again at the way that international travel operates before the 1st of October. It says that it's worked hard to open international travel as quickly and safely as possible, and the sector will have benefited from around £7 billion of government support since the start of the pandemic. While the summer season is nearly over, there's still some heat between the travel industry and the government. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Campaigners say people with autism are too often being failed by the health and social care system in England. Research by the charity The Health Foundation shows only around 10% of social care staff have had any training in how to support people with autism. And the National Autistic Society says more than 300,000 people are being let down by their local social services. Despite £5.6 billion, that's 40% of local authority spending on social care, going to people with learning disabilities and autism. The government says it's launched a new autism strategy with additional funding aimed at speeding up diagnosis and improving crisis support. Our correspondent Jeremy Cook has been to meet one family who feel let down by the social care system.
Hi, my name's Will. I'm 18 and I have severe mental health problems.
He was passionate about so many things. He was intelligent. He was so loving, but he had been troubled his whole life.
I think it's important to share my experience so other people can get the treatment that they need.
Will Melbourne died when he was 19. He'd been reaching out, trying to save others, but felt abandoned by the services that were supposed to save him.
It's such a failure of the system that a boy of that, incredible mind and talent could go through so much pain in his life.
Will was autistic and lived with the torment of chronic anxiety and depression. He loved music, and he and his mum wrote this piece together. It is the sound of love and pain and loss.
I remember I started just crying in class. I'd just stare at the wall and start crying for absolutely no reason. Then I started getting quite suicidal.
A crisis point. Will's family says it came after a lifetime of letdowns, of waiting 6 years for an autism diagnosis, struggling to get help with mental illness and drug use, and fragmented, inconsistent support from social services.
Imagine if you're suffering and you might even die due to suicide, and yet you're not being given therapy because you have to wait a year and 2 months to get it. It's utterly disgraceful.
He would overdose, he would self-harm, he would cut his wrists, he was attacking us. It was literally untenable.
I was saw by a psychiatric nurse, and do you want to know what they told me? Told me to download a mindfulness app after I just tried to kill myself. An app.
Will was buying drugs on the dark web, self-medication. His life was spiralling down.
He thought of himself as a monster, and he wanted to cure himself, and he wanted to fit into society.
Eventually, the local authority found Will a place to live. He was moved to what's called supported accommodation.
You trust that he is safe with that body, whoever's looking after him. And it was clear that he wasn't safe at all.
Yeah. Will died alone in squalor, in the assisted living flat where he was supposed to be safe.
As the need got stronger, the help seemed to fall away even more. It's incredible.
Was Will savable?
Oh God, yeah. I'm really angry, and I'm really angry at the system. I'm really angry for all the people that are going through this now, and there must be thousands.
This whole system is based on the idea that you have to be in crisis to get help. The crisis service is just not fit for purpose.
Will's family hope an inquest will help answer how and why their son died.
I hope my experience helps someone. Thanks for watching.
The voice of Will Melbourne there in that report from Jeremy Cook. And if you've been affected by what you've just seen, you can find help and advice on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk/actionline. England's good start against India continued on the second day of the third cricket test at Headingley. Another century from the captain. 123 for 8 in their first innings. They have a huge lead of 345 over the tourists, bowled out for just 78 in their first innings. And Great Britain took 5 golds across 4 sports on day 2 of the Tokyo Paralympics. Sir Lee Pearson won his 12th Paralympic title in the Grade 2 individual equestrian test, while there was also success in the velodrome and in the pool. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss reports from Tokyo, and his report contains flashing images.
For Britain's Paralympians, a day of elation and emotion. First for Jacko van Gas. The cyclist was once a soldier, but in Afghanistan in 2009, he suffered life-changing injuries. Now here he was on one of sport's biggest stages, chasing his teammate Finn Graham in the pursuit final. It proved some tussle, but Van Gas edged ahead and held his nerve.
Jacko van Gas takes it.
Triumph for the 35-year-old and another addition to his extraordinary CV. He's previously trekked to the North Pole with Prince Harry. Now, alongside his teammate, he could celebrate another famous feat. And so, for the second day running, the velodrome has delivered British delight. And as the sun set here in Tokyo, others were adding to that golden tally. In the para-dressage, a Paralympic legend, Sir Lee Pearson winning the 12th gold of his career on Breezer, a horse he bred at his home in Staffordshire. Something he told me which made it all the sweeter.
It makes it unbelievably extra special. I literally saw him the day that he was born. He stayed really brave, and I still think there's a little bit more in the tank, but he did the perfect test today that he could do.
And the gold rush continued. Wheelchair fencer Piers Gilliver winning his first Paralympic title. While over at the pool, there was even more to celebrate. Maisie Summers-Newton was inspired to swim by watching Ellie Simmonds at London 2012. Today, in the individual medley, she beat her hero. Simmonds 5th, Summers-Newton a glorious 1st. But if you thought she was happy, well, back home in Northampton, just look what it meant. And there was also gold for Tully Kearney in the 100 metres freestyle on a day when British smiles were in plentiful supply. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Tokyo.
Before we go, President Biden is now addressing the American people and has paid tribute to those US soldiers killed in today's twin bomb attacks in Kabul. But that's it from us here on BBC One. Now it's time for all the news where you are. Bye for now.